Terry will take over. Terry Quillco is a writer. You've seen his work in Fra Noi, and we worked on that book that the Fra Noi did on the various feasts. He has put together a play, a short, is it 15 minutes play, about the history of his family as it started off in the cold country of Illinois before they came and they re-migrated to the Chicago area. Terry?
Just to say, I don't think there's any gathering of authors that could be more interesting and more diverse than what we found here today. Really amazing. William Faulkner famously said, "The past is not dead." Like Jacob Marley, found with chains and ledgers, forks in life, visiting us unbidden, the actions, desires, hopes, dreams, and fears of those before us live on in us and are brought up to the earth and down from the heavens. As immigrants or sons and daughters of immigrants, we are bipolar, schizoid existence in two worlds, not wholly fitting in either. We can become insular, trying to recreate the old, or we can look toward outward, seeing what we are as people from foreign lands join us in our journey, not in a melting pot, but in a boiling cauldron, where oil and water don't mix, but where diversity and commonality push and pull us to the future. This play is memory, but it's not dead or even past. Our ancestors are here in this room, sitting in these chairs, demanding space in our hearts, souls, and minds. All the characters portrayed are real, and they lived through these transformative and dramatic events. My visits to my grandparents in Seatonville as a boy were not unlike a visit to an alien planet might feel. Coming from an urban Chicago neighborhood to a rural location of seeming simplicity and sublime beauty, without most of what Chicagoans would take for granted, like indoor plumbing. Adding the fact that my grandparents spoke no English and I know Italian made the visits more mysterious and magical. I thank the Casa Italia players, Anna Weiss, and my Fra Noi colleague, CJ Martello, who acted in iHamlet for me in 2017. And despite the experience, came back again. Frank Piero and Joliet Herald. Anna gets a special thanks also for coordinating IA Literati. And of course, our couple, Dominic C. Also, I want to thank my wife, Darlene, my cousin Candace, my son Derek. Darlene and Derek both, because of COVID, when we did this Zoom version of this during COVID 2020. And Candace gave me so much support, archival things, letters from the family, pictures, everything, documentation. This wouldn't be up there if not for her. I leave you the words of Giuliana Sapienza, who wrote The Meeting in Passapato. Life is always a novel left unwritten if we leave it buried inside us. And I believe in literature.
white, asbestos shingled with green shutters, 2 pear trees behind the low picket fence, a lawn roller and mower to the side, the porch with the red, green, and white clamshell metal chairs. The pump on the side porch, the vegetable garden with lettuce, peppers, beans, and tomatoes, the grapevines, the whetstone wheel, the path to the outhouse and barn. It has not changed. It is all the same.
I first saw him with his mustache and cigarillo parading on the Via Caneva with his 2 army friends, all brass buttoned, full of swagger with their Stella d'Italia on their lapels. His companions were full of rude jokes, but he was quiet, serious, with steel gray eyes. A month later, we are working in the fields of La Cascina, and he comes riding his cavallo, il figlio del capo che guarda I suoi lavoranti. He watches me all week, and then on the way home, he follows me, leading his horse and speaking in that quiet, soft voice of his. And that was all.
I saw her on Caneva. She moved like a ship on the sea, all swaying and fluid, with the cold black eyes to match her hair, laughing with her friends. And then in the campo, her motion at work was filled with purpose and grace, with that same grace given freely to those around her. That was all. What does love care of class, wealth, land, and breed?
Si, certo, Antonio. That is why we were accepted by all and why we left our beloved families, land, and all our paesani, like unwilling mariners without charts or provisions to make this sad life in America.
We would drive from Chicago in my dad's Studebaker, sometimes with my mom and rarely with my older brother. We would stop at White Castle and eat while driving with him, holding a can of Old Style, low on the rim of the steering wheel. With each passing mile, his burden of city life and business would lighten. He told me of his nickname Dito and how he gained it by being so fast on the bases, playing baseball, and how sometimes he would step on a hornet's nest and bare feet, and how he loved the New York Yankees because of all the great Italian players, Lazzari, Rizzuto, DiMaggio, and Barra. He spoke of how he would bring their 3 cows from pasture across the creek and recalled foraging for coal on the side of the tracks that fell as freight trains rumbled through a curve for use in the stove at home. He once said that their horse knew the way home, so his mama didn't worry when Antonio had too much to drink at the tavern in Seatonville. In Spring Valley, he stopped at the Italian butcher's for saltisa, and if the road was clear, he let me shoot at road signs with my BB gun. The evening was built around La Cena, and it always had the same script. My job was to pick the beans and lettuce, washing the lettuce at the hand pump on the side porch. Sometimes we would have bagna cauda, but more usually it was polenta with melted cheese inside and a rich garlic, egg, and butter-infused tomato sauce. The saltisa sausage, Italian-style green beans fried in garlic and bacon, and the lettuce insalata, salted with wine vinegar and oil, all washed down with Nonno's homemade bread from the tiny cellar under the side porch. My father would always ask if the electricity was okay. He put in electric lights some years ago, and they would ask about their daughter Lena, who lived in a Chicago suburb. And Dad would ask about his sister Emma, who lived on a large farm with her English husband a few miles away. When the meal was over, Antonio would sit over his small glass of vino while Caterina scoured the dishes, pots and pans, and furiously swept the floor while talking a mile a minute of how she was torn away from her Bella Italia, famiglia, and amici to live this hard life in the Stati Uniti. Unfazed and never protesting, Antonio would smooth his mustache and nurse his glass and muttered under his breath, "Fatti for bicotti." To break the mood, Tito would either play his concertina or the upright piano in the front parlor, singing some well-loved Italian songs or arias that would bring Nonna to tears. My bedroom was at the front of the house, looking out on the pear trees and the brilliant star canopy, with sounds of the locomotives straining and climbing the grade. But dominating the landscape was the looming Seatonville spoils dump of orange and black earth, dredged up from the coal-rich, hollowed-out ground below, and the sister scarred peaks in Ladd and in the distance, Cherry Valley.
Down on the coal face in shaft 2, their carbide lamps flickered and sputtered, casting dancing sharp shadows on the black walls and timbers. The partners, Mateo, a digger, and Antonio, a blaster, made a good team working efficiently and silently. Antonio's job was one of the most hazardous in the mine. He had to go under the coal shelf, set the dynamite and igniter caps, cutting the fuses to the right length so they could have time to avoid the blast, sheltering, and then loading together to fill the car to its 2-ton capacity.
Let us go up early today. We have done enough for our pails of beer. Let us ring for the hoisting cage and let the bosses be damned.
Certo, Tony, it is almost 3. Let us fill this last car and ring for the cage.
Exiting the cage and sucking in the sweet, cool air, the 2 men went to the United Mine Workers check weighman's shack to get the slip to verify the wages they earned today. As they left, they saw trappers, cagers, slave pickers, and mule handlers in a group looking toward black smoke billowing in the distance.
Mateo, Guada, it is the cherry mine. For sure it is a big fire. We have to get to Ladd to hop a train for Cherry. Alicio, our neighbor, is in that mine. Our help is needed.
Standing on the packed flat car loaded with miners and firemen, the 2 Seatonville miners saw people on both sides of the tracks, in buggies, cars, and on foot, hurrying toward the mine. Men, women hiking their skirts up to run faster, children behind, as smoke and flames blossom from the mule barn, tipple, and mine buildings ahead.
I tell you, Mateo, I am thinking of Marchetti when the roof collapsed and I could not pull him to safety. Frank Minardi, when he died between those coal cars, and that poor Paul, August Romanowski. It is all too much to bear. How can this happen at the safest mine in the country?
It was bedlam at the mine head. The huge Clifford Capel fan that provided air to the mine was on fire, as was the mule barn. Flames and smoke shot out of the ventilating shaft and burnt, smoldering bodies littered the ground. As they watched, a cage came up, but all were dead, piled atop one another as in a hellish charnel house. Women were crying, praying, and screaming for their husbands, brothers, and sons as the police tried to hold them back. The 2 Seatonville miners were told that a hay car was ignited by a kerosene lamp and set everything ablaze. And the ventilator fanned the flames and sucked oxygen out of the mine when it was reversed. Worst of all, cars filled with coal kept coming to the top while the fire and smoke filled the shafts, killing miners below.
You know, Mateo, I am not a religious man, but I swear by the Blessed Mother and all that is holy that I will never go down in a mine again. The Cherry Mine disaster is the 3rd worst in U.S. history and the worst mine fire. Of the 480 men and boys who went down in the mine that day, 259 perished. Americans and immigrant miners from every country in Europe, including 64 Italians. The steel and concrete mine was built as the safest in Illinois and had electric lights in the main shafts. But weeks before, the electricity failed due to a short circuit, and the ordered replacement wiring had not arrived, causing the mine to revert to the old practice of kerosene lanterns, one of which spilled onto a loaded hay cart, igniting it. The cart was pushed down into the mine instead of pushing it up in hopes of extinguishing the fire by a hose in one of the sumps. But the flames spread to the timbers. The fire was misjudged as insignificant. So coal cars continued to be brought out while the miners were not told to abandon the mine until hundreds of them were trapped below. An engineer who was responsible for the main hoisting cage did not bring miners up, despite pleas of those around him, because he didn't receive the proper signals from those below. He was removed from the town before the inquest. The St. Paul Coal Company that operated the mine for the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railroad made sure that several on-site company officials who would have given unfavorable testimony at the inquest would not be located. There were numerous acts of heroism by miners and rescuers, and the disaster-filled newspaper headlines worldwide. When all was considered lost, Antonio Quattaroli and 20 companions were rescued after 8 days trapped below. It can be said that they did not suffer and die in vain. In 1910, the U.S. Bureau of Mines was established, child labor laws and a workers' compensation act was passed by Congress, and many new regulations were enacted, governing safety in the mine industry. Antonio made good on his vow and never went down in the mines again. He was hired by the same company that owned the mine and worked as a trainmaster and boilermaker for the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railroad. Caterina and Antonio were married in the registry office in Bureau County on May 25, 1899, raising 2 daughters and a son. Antonio never spoke of the mines or of his service in the Italian army in the decades after the unification of Italy. But when his son wanted to become a flyer to fight in the Great War, he received the only slap he was ever given with the words, "You do not know the horrors of war, and long as I am alive, you will not learn them." Caterina attended Mass at St. Gertrude's and quietly said a rosary each evening. They never learned English, never became U.S. citizens, and are buried in Bureau County in the same earth that Antonio toiled under.
Thanks, Terry.